Good morning, welcome all. We hopefully will have one more panelist joining us online, but we do have some issues with time differences. So I have full faith in our two panelists here today to hold down the fort. But I want to welcome you all to this space, folks who are joining in person and folks who are joining online. So my name is Britta Dornfeld. I'm a partnership manager with Environmental Initiative, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a co-leader of the Sustainable Growth Coalition, which is convening this meeting today. And I'm excited to have all of you here today to discuss embodied carbon. Thank you for joining, and I hope that today is fun, interactive, and that you leave having learned something and connected to someone. To get us started, I want to acknowledge that we are convening this space from Minnesota, the homeland of the Dakota people, and where the Dakota and Anishinaabe people, as well as Indigenous people from other tribal nations currently reside. If you're online, we'd love for each of you to let us know in the chat where you're calling from and the native land that you are on, as well as who you are if you haven't introduced yourself in the chat. This is part of our best practice series, and it's a reimagining of how that series works. So in addition to this publicly available panel, we will be having small group discussions in person, and for some of us, as you can tell by my dress, a tour of an active deconstruction site. So I'm excited that everyone is here either virtually or in person. We're going to have about 50 minutes to hear from our speakers and then 25 minutes for an online Q&A. So a lot of time for Q&A. So if you have any questions, either please just raise your hand if you're interested or drop them in the chat and I will be monitoring that. So I want to thank our presenters for being here today, and they are going to be introducing themselves. So Beth, if you'd like to get started.
Thank you for having me here. My name is Beth Tomlinson. I'm with Stantec, and I am the Carbon and Climate Discipline for buildings in North America. We're a collaboration of scientists, engineers, building specialists across North America that focus on carbon and climate. Richard.
Yeah, I'm Richard Graves. I'm the director of the Center for Sustainable Building Research at the University of Minnesota. We manage the state's B3 programs, Minnesota Sustainable Building Guidelines for all state funded construction. And that program has been working on embodied carbon for 20 plus years. And then also as kind of an extension of that work going forward, we're the technical advisors to the Clean task force that's getting set up in Minnesota to spend the next 5 years developing and rolling out a embodied carbon procurement standard for state work with departments of administration and transportation.
All right, well, thank you both for being here today. Hopefully Marnice Jackson with the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition is able to join us. If she's not, I will ask her some questions after this. But to get us started, I do want just to kind of ground us. How do you define embodied carbon?
That's an excellent question. In the buildings industry, I refer to the ISO standards of 1400 series that defines the whole life cycle of the building industry and carbon analysis. And in that, embodied carbon is the associated energy with the production, transportation, manufacturing, and end of life of systems and materials. In addition, for buildings, the construction, energy, operations of the building, and ongoing maintenance replacement of the system. So it's very holistic.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to that is the industry way, kind of accepted way out of those standards are environmental product declarations, or the we will probably get way into the wonky weeds of the stuff, but that's the way you measure greenhouse gas emissions of products. There's different types of, there's various types. Generally, type 3, which are third-party certified environmental product declarations are what we're looking at having collected to be able to compare one product to another. So that's a way of measuring.
Actually, let me correct myself. What you're referencing is the ISO series.
Yeah.
For EPDs, I was incorrect. The embodied carbon or holistic analysis of whole life cycle of embodied and operational emissions, that is in European standards. We have 15,978,
Yeah.
just for people's reference.
So you know. And then I think since Marnice has not been able to join us, I'm just going to quickly move this off the screen, so we're not all staring at ourselves in 3D Zoom matrix land.
Yeah.
But once she hopefully is able to join, we will move that Zoom back over. So my next question for you all is, what do you see as the largest challenges to addressing the issue of embodied carbon?
Well, I will speak as a practitioner. We currently have an everything, everywhere, all at once scenario where the entire industry, global commitments towards net zero across all industries is a major driver. And in the building industry, practitioners are deeply interested in promoting, encouraging, and incentivizing net zero design of building operations and embodied carbon. And in that, we are requesting environmental product declarations, like I mentioned, from our vendors in order to specify low carbon, low embodied carbon materials. And that is providing owners the power of procurement, leaning into investment in that industry. So that's where we're going, but not everybody has EPDs available. And so the industry needs to supply us, the designers, with EPDs. And that's really where we're leaning into now, is reaching out to our vendors, asking for that documentation so that we can prioritize their materials.
Yes, just to add to, or build on that complexity, you're dealing with you're trying to get data on a particular product into a system. A typical building project might have 3,000 to 6,000 products in it. And that's what actually gets installed. There's probably multiple options for every one of those things. And then you're trying to quantify the greenhouse gas emissions across all these stages. So anyway, you can see it gets exponential in a hurry. So just the complexity of all is quite a challenge. And then I think within that, there's the data problem, but then there's sort of the how do people managing all of this prioritize and make, because there's no way your brain, your time can possibly track all those options down. So you've got to say, okay, in all this, for each unique thing we're doing, where are the priorities? And it's hard to figure that out and kind of educate folks on how to do that. So.
And also add that one of the challenges is, as we specify low carbon materials through selection and review of EPDs, if we have state or federal projects, there is a requirement that there are 3 like materials specified for every option. And that can be a challenge if you were to use baseline expectations for embodied carbon performance. You would have to seek out 3 similar vendors that have comparable materials to make that requirement consistent for all bidders. So it does get challenging. So we're asking the industry to really lean in and provide an abundance of opportunity and options.
All right. And then thinking of where we are in the upper Midwest, are there any unique challenges to dealing with embodied carbon in this space?
Yes. So one of the, and we did it was 2 years ago, we did a report to the legislature about embodied carbon and historic, let's say 10 or 15 years ago, the challenge was lots of great European data on this stuff, not that much North American data. So you're trying to figure out, how do we take a data set from Europe, bring it to North America, fudge a few things and call it, oh, that's kind of good for what we're estimating. In the last, say, 5-6 years with Clean kind of initiatives, California, Pacific Northwest, New York, those, what we've seen is lots of EPDs by manufacturers kind of on the coasts and nothing in the middle. So the good news is our concrete EPDs in Minnesota, we've got, I don't know the latest numbers, we had about half of concrete products had EPDs, with the other half kind of in the works. So concrete industry kind of ahead of things, but if you think about some of the other high embodied carbon materials, one steel EPD as of a year ago, nothing really enriched insulation, nothing in a lot of other product categories, so that's a big challenge. If we're gonna roll some of these things out, we've got to build out EPDs into our supply chain, and not just Minnesota, because our supply chain is bigger than that. So back to the complexity problem, but yeah, that's a unique challenge that we have here.
Yeah, with my building expertise, I would say that manufacturing in an extreme cold climate or, vendors, producers here in the state, they have high energy demand that will be associated to the production of their materials, in which case their EPDs will reflect the high energy intensity associated with materials. In addition, we have, I would say, longer transportation lines. Being here in the Midwest, yes, we have Lake Superior, that's an export, but we do have additional transportation expenses and emissions associated with production of materials. I would say we have a lot of opportunity for local manufacturing so that transportation costs and emissions are reduced, as decarbonizing our grid, which we're on track for right now. That will support improved EPDs for local manufacturers. So there's a lot of opportunity, but yes, there are challenges for being located in Minnesota. And I would say, this is true for most national firms, that their transportation emissions are largely associated with shipping, global shipping, and, bringing materials back to the United States. And I know that the industry is really focusing on shipping and training right now. So I hope that that will continue to evolve and will be less of a challenge so that we can continue our global connections and resourcing. But at this point, that is certainly a challenge.
Well, I think kind of talking about challenges, but you also brought up some opportunities. So what are some of the other opportunities you see with reducing embodied carbon?
Yeah, I mean, I think one huge opportunity that we have is, the rise of doing buy clean initiatives and EPDs. It's kind of a uniquely, just focusing on that is kind of a North American thing. Like, we're gonna buy concrete for the structure of the building, and we're gonna get an EPD so our concrete's better concrete than we would have bought otherwise. It's sort of a consumerist approach to reducing embodied carbon. So that's good, we need to do that, but a huge opportunity we have is kind of on the beginning stages of design and using a tool, it's called whole building LCAs in the building sector, but if you're doing roads, bridges, or other things, it's these early tools where you can compare, okay, are we gonna use a wood structure versus a steel structure versus a concrete structure? And what are the needs of this particular facility for structure? And then we can switch from one system to another. We picked a structural system. Now, how do we optimize that thing? We typically would design it to have a certain amount of concrete and a parking garage or something, and that's based on a certain set of assumptions. Maybe we challenge some of those assumptions, and we could use 20-30% less concrete and still achieve the thing and have all that savings. So I think some of those kind of early phase things, which again, kind of, we've been in B3 doing whole building LCAs for 20+ years, and the kind of consultants and people that we work with in Minnesota are really good at it, maybe better than other places. That's one thing that we could kind of, I think we can bring to the conversation and bring the two things together to kind of get a more holistic approach to embodied carbon reductions.
I'm an eternal optimist. I see a lot of great opportunities here and ahead of us. I would say that in the building industry, we had a great transition towards green facilities, green design back quarter of a century ago, we're at that influx again, and the whole industry is leaning into net zero. And we in the building industry, as a member and volunteer with an organization called ASHRAE, which not everyone is aware of, so it's an international engineering society that focuses on building standards, which then are incorporated by building codes. And we are currently developing a standard in conjunction with the ICC, which is the International Codes Council, on a standard methodology of accounting for greenhouse gas emissions within the building industry. And we anticipate that the standard is being developed much faster than we typically do. We hope that it will be available by 2025. And what this will do is create a holistic greenhouse gas accounting for the building industry, operational emissions, and embodied carbon emissions. It will provide methodology for authorities having jurisdiction to adopt emission regulations with being fuel agnostic, so that there's less constraints, less conflict around specific fuel being used, but allowing the market to come to the table with solutions, creative solutions, and allowing greenhouse gas emissions to be an expectation, and allowing the designers and the industry to come together for creative solutions to meet those goals. So I really see a lot of opportunity coming ahead of us, and as the building industry drives those regulatory changes, that impacts the vendors, the suppliers, the EPDs, then start requiring net zero mining, net zero transportation, changes in manufacturing, circular economy. So it really is a holistic change that's happening right now. So I'm really excited.
Well, and I think you spoke a little bit about embodied carbon regulation. And one thing we had discussed earlier was potential broader benefits to embodied carbon regulation. So if you could speak to those, that would be great.
Well, beyond the embodied carbon impacting various industry sectors, I would say that there's an environmental justice consideration that we haven't really mentioned yet. I work on decarbonization of the building industry. I help our clients pursue their ESG commitments, their scope 1 and 2 regulations, and some guidance in the ESG advisory for scope 3. So what I try to bring to the table is the co-benefits of decarbonization, specifically for low income or BIPOC communities where historic zoning have often put, carbon intensive or dirty industry transportation through those communities. And we decarbonize buildings, transportation, manufacturing. The health benefits to those communities will be phenomenal. We'll reduce cardiovascular disease, respiratory illnesses like asthma. So these communities will benefit from decarbonization and support of embodied carbon reduction across all industries.
Yeah, just one of the challenges that have all working on embodied carbon kind of forces designers and owners to kind of question and analyze, okay, what are the things we're gonna use to build that road, build that building, whatever, which is a good thing because, those industries generally are kind of fairly conservative, do things the way we've always done it, kind of use the same materials we've always used because we know they work, they perform. So there's this kind of inertia in the whole industry that this analysis lets us kind of dive into and say, okay, why are we doing things that way? Or when we're making a product, why are we, using those materials or doing these processes? So there's a lot of benefits that come out of that analysis to kind of rethink things for, equity reasons, energy reasons, health reasons. And, some manufacturers have seen cost savings by, you're trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that might move you to finding a lower energy way to produce whatever you do that might save, save and help the bottom line. One of the challenges in all this is that, EPDs and LCAs are good at tracking greenhouse gas emissions. They are horrid at tracking health impacts, community impacts, water. I could give you a list of 40 things we try to track in them that they don't do well, good at the greenhouse gas. So I think we've got to find, again, we've got a couple things together, you know, and there's healthy product declarations are a thing that's kind of coming in the building industry that starts to be a thing. You add the two things together and you can get a more complete picture. And that's something that we've got to try to think about. So, yeah, that's a big area.
Yes. Well, I have heard online, there's a bit of an echo, so if you can just
Okay.
speak up a little bit more, you might see me slowly moving things during our next question. But we did get a little bit at equity in our last question, and one other thing that we had discussed was also how some of this work can help smaller firms and help lift that up, and how that looks with equity. So if either of you could speak to that, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the report we did 2 years ago, one danger with environmental product declarations, they can be expensive for manufacturers to create. There's wide variety of how much, well, there's wide variety on how much they cost, depending upon the industry sector. There's apparently wide variety of the quality of what you get for third-party review, which may or may not relate to the cost. But all that makes it hard, it kind of advantages the larger manufacturers to be able to create them. You know, they might be global enterprises that they have a system where they're just doing EPDs everywhere. They've kind of streamlined it and they probably have their costs way down. That can create a challenge for kind of regional, local manufacturer that, you know, the suggestion we had is, you know, maybe that's a role for the state or other groups to provide a grant program to kind of even the playing field for the creation of some of these things. So, and open it up to maybe the potential for innovation from some of these smaller firms, because they can create a new product, do something different, disrupt the industry, and equal a, you know, level playing field that way too, which is gonna be interesting.
But I would say my thoughts on this, I'm familiar with GSA provided some guidance around concrete and steel for production of their facilities and their construction, you know, projects. Through that process, they provided training through the EPA on the development of EPDs, and there was a grant available for training manufacturers or various industry leaders on how to develop EPDs. So I know that there's federal investment for supporting EPD development, and there's training available. And I don't think that's going to be limited to, you know, larger firms versus smaller firms. It should be an equal playing field. But, you know, referring back to the great change that we had about a quarter century ago around sustainable buildings, that usually prioritize the largest manufacturers first that develop those new and innovative solutions. They really leaned in because they had the power to make that change, and then it became cost effective for others to come to the table with their solutions. I feel like the EPD development of larger industry providers right now are streamlining the process, are creating the databases so that others can follow suit later with perhaps a more cost effective process. I would say, in addition, if manufacturers are looking for solutions to reduce their overall, you know, EPD greenhouse gas emissions associated with the product, they may be seeking local vendors, local manufacturers that will incentivize growth within a local market, which then can support expansion of, you know, other communities leading into being service providers. So I see a lot of opportunity here. It may not be at the table right now, but give it just maybe a couple more years for this to percolate through, and I can see a lot of opportunity.
All right, we're gonna kind of switch gears now, and can you speak to how you gather data on embodied carbon or embodied carbon assessments and inventories?
Excellent question. You know, I would say that we have an international committee right now and working on this greenhouse gas accounting standard, and we are working with industry leaders on what is available, and if there's perhaps a void of readily available data, we are providing kind of baseline expectations that you can pull in as an example for now until the industry provides more data for, you know, selection and review and selection. So we know that there are certain industries that don't have a lot of data, so we're prioritizing right now the industries that have the most impact. And Richard, you mentioned steel and concrete, by far, the embodied carbon, significant contributor right now is those structural elements that, are the baseline for most buildings. We're focusing there and then slowly adding in, available data as it comes up. We were talking about water and wastewater industry, not necessarily providing customers with a greenhouse gas associated with their units of utility that customers consuming or providing back to the utility. So, there's placeholder for that, and hopefully we'll be expanding it as more research and data analysis is available.
Yes, collecting data, so, complicated. ISO standards, European standards on how to do all this stuff, so there are rules around, there are rules around the environmental product declaration on how to calculate the data. So that's one set of rules. Then within a product category, there are product category rules, which, so for instance, asphalt, there'll be asphalt, we're collecting EPDs of a certain type of product. There are sub rules within a certain product that say what we're gonna count, what we're not gonna count, what we're gonna count, and then which way. So, so imagine all that across different product categories that's being collected in the databases. So you've got quantity problems where there's gaps, there's nothing there. You've got quality problems where there's something there, but garbage in, garbage out, kind of things with data. What else? The other challenge that the other thing that I see happening now, with lots of people interested in embodied carbon, there's lots of interest and kind of enthusiasm, but kind of not understanding this landscape. So groups are just like coming in and making tools, and it's violating every rule that you can think of when you see a tool created, and they're giving you results that look really cool, and that could be a really great product label. And I'm looking at it and thinking that is absolute garbage, because it's all just built upon something that you really can't stitch all that together. I mean, it's exactly what we need, and we need people to make stuff like that, but the challenge is navigating all that stuff. The other challenge is, at what point is it the right point with the right data to make decisions picking between, like the concrete versus wood example, or the concrete versus steel example. Not the right time with EPDs to do that, because you've got product categories for one thing, product categories for the other, and it's not really great for switching. It's much better to do that kind of stuff in the whole building kind of early phase things. Yeah, anyway, that's a lot of stuff. It's complicated, but it's really important to understand that, I mean, for instance, hopefully not to horrify everybody, but the quality of the data in LCAs, for some of these products are plus or minus huge, like hundreds of percentages at times. So you think to yourself, okay, what do I do with that? Well, what you do with it is you can say, this concrete product relative to this one, I can make a comparison that's good for that. Make a product label, like a cereal box label for it, not so good for that, because we don't really know, there's too wide of a range of things. So that's the kind of stuff that, we're in the early, I was at a conference a year ago, and people are trying to use embodied carbon information like we use building energy models. And this person who's been kind of in the space of this stuff for a long time said that the information we have embodied carbon isn't even as good as what we have for energy models for building back in the 70s. So what's that? That's a long time, 40, 50 years behind kind of quality of data. So we just gotta say, okay, that's where we are, but we can still, it shouldn't hold us back from making decisions. We can still, make some improvements, integrated into the design process, but just being aware of the landscape. Sorry, that was a lot. I apologize.
I think that's really important information, and it does highlight, where we are today in the industry. It is at the beginning. We're gathering the data, we're developing the tools, we're developing the reporting methodologies. Everything's happening at the same time, and that's just because of the urgency of climate change. We need to do all of this together collectively. So we're learning and growing together. I would say that as a practitioner, Stantec has 18,000 projects a year in North America. We could pick 10 of those and prioritize high performance and really make an impactful change to the industry, because we are selecting the top worst performers for greenhouse gas emissions in our buildings and go to those vendors and say, we really want to make a difference, please help us. And then get those vendors to get on board. And as we start implementing this, start small, look at, where's the best return on investment? Where do you prioritize greenhouse gas reduction? Work with those vendors, expand out from there. It doesn't have to be so overwhelming that you don't start. It has to at least lean in, start working together, develop a methodology, develop relationships, expand everyone's basis of understanding of what we're trying to achieve, and collectively we'll make progress.
Right, so we are almost at the end of our questions, and the last question was really more for Marnice, which was about the potential for carbon sequestration with embodied carbon reduction. So let's see if that's something that either of you can speak to, otherwise we can move into the Q&A portion.
No, I want to hear what your answers are.
I know of product suppliers that are changing their manufacturing process to include carbon sequestration in their general reporting of the embodied carbon of their products. They're trying to find co-benefits between the manufacturing process and carbon sequestration. That's a market differentiator that I think people are really leaning into. They're looking for creative solutions from vendors to find changes within the products we use every day to make them better. Concrete is an example where, additive materials can claim carbon sequestration during the manufacturing process, and that can be reported to a client saying, we have chosen this supplier because of this co-benefit, and therefore you can report, reduction of your building construction. So I see that happening more. I can't speak to the veracity of each and every claim, but I feel like it is changing the market and incentivizing manufacturers to find those solutions that can differentiate their product.
Yeah, so carbon sequestration, very, very controversial, but should be factored in some way. Why it's controversial is you get certain industries and certain products, wood lends itself to sequestration. If you factor that in, maybe that gives you an advantage and convinces people to switch from one product to your product. So how do you categorize, it's an example of jumping from one product category, which is hard to do with the data. You have to be consistent so you know what you're doing, and it's controversial because it can start to create kind of winners, losers, and switch from one product to another. So, however, it ought to be factored in because it is a thing. It does have an impact in that way. It also, to Beth's point, within concrete, I think there's something like, there's probably more than this, but I've seen 6 or 8 different versions of cement mixes, aggregate mixes, and trying to figure out which one of those materials have sequestration properties and how do we put those in and meet our performance requirements for what we're and track the data. So that kind of stuff seemed really interesting to me, and a kind of potential innovation in a really tough product. But yeah, it's the Wild West with carbon sequestration. So let's do it. Let's figure it out. But just know it's Wild West. So.